Okay. We are getting going here. We're also now streaming live on YouTube. That will be found on the Marymount Institute website on the YouTube, I should say channel, get my nomenclature correct. So far we have about 19 attendees, and I'm pausing it so I'm not hearing myself on YouTube, always distracting. My name is Gigi Johnson. I have the charm and pleasure of teaching now at UCLA for 20 years, but also 10 at the Herb Alpert School of Music, also running the Marymount Institute and having a really interesting time working with so many people around the world right now on the challenges and changes happening in the music industry. Um, you are at a session that is being run by Music Cities Together and Music Policy Forum, and I will introduce them in a second. But I thought I would start out as our hostess, sharing what the rules of the road are going to be. If you have questions, we are doing this in Zoom webinar format. So those of you who are living in Zoom Pro, the chat feature here is not one of the options. Instead, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. And so please feel free as we move forward. We'll be taking questions, Michael, at the end of each segment or at the end totally?
I think probably at the end totally.
Okay, so if you have questions, please take advantage of the Q&A box for those of you who are in the Zoom conversation. For those of you who are joining us via YouTube Live, you can also reach out during or after the event, probably more after, at musicpolicyforum.org to share your thoughts and concerns, and you'll have more information as we move forward. If you get lost in Zoom, I'm assuming everyone's getting quite Zoom fluent, you can hit F6 and you can rotate to the screen you thought you lost. If you need to be stepping away, please feel free. In this format, we are not seeing you, your family members, your dog, or your small children. So thank you very much for joining us. This is a very important conversation. Don't mean to be sounding so flip. I used to work at Disneyland, so you've got my Disneyland voice started here. But I want to thank everybody for being part of this conversation, and I will now hand the baton over to Michael Bracey.
Thank you, Gigi, so much for your help and your partnership on this. And thanks to everybody who's joined us today. Again, this is Michael Bracey. I think I know most of you who have dialed in, but just to give a little bit of background on what we're doing here, again, Music Cities Together is a new partnership that Music Policy Forum and Don Pitts at Sound Music Strategies and others have been working on for a number of months. That was planned on, we actually were going to roll it out at South by on March 18th. And of course, we didn't do that because of obvious reasons. But one of the main priorities of this partnership is just information sharing and the notion that we all spend a lot of our day-to-day existence and our professional existence sharing ideas and strategies and having one-on-one conversations. And to the extent to which we can help bring those to scale to broader communities, we think is really helpful and useful. So we've piloted today's session over the last couple of weeks. Many of you participated in webinars that Kate Becker from King County held, focusing on the public health crisis and response in King County. And today is the first of our new model, which we are tentatively planning on rolling out for the next 8 weeks. Please give us feedback if you feel like this is helpful, if it's a waste of your time, if there are topics that you'd like to see covered. But the idea is we're going to spend a crisp hour and we're going to focus on a couple of showcase a couple of ideas or strategies or approaches that we think are particularly useful and meaningful at this time of crisis. Again, today is March 27th. If you're watching this down the road, things are changing incredibly quickly in terms of the public health crisis and the economic shutdown. So we want to be timely. We also are going to, again, have these available for archive so people can go back through and try to pick up this information later. So we're thrilled about the 3 invited guests that you know are joining us. So we're going to move into this presentation shortly. We have some breaking news out of Washington, D.C., which is that the government bailout, the $2.3 trillion legislation passed the House of Representatives in the last hour. It'll be signed by the president, I assume, very shortly. And because this is such important information, such pressing information, we asked Kevin Erickson, who is my old colleague at Future Music Coalition and has been working on this day and night, to join us to tell us literally everything that's in the bill. No, I'm joking. Just to give us 2 or 3 minutes of perspective on what are some of the wins in the bill, what's in that thing from the standpoint of the music community, and more importantly, what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks as we try to decipher where we go in terms of this funding being pushed out to communities and available. So Kevin, thanks for pinch hitting. Again, just a couple of minutes on, and again, huge thanks to you and all of the advocates who've been working tirelessly in Congress on Capitol Hill to try to make this the best possible bill for the music community. So, Kevin, what would you like us to hear?
Hi, good afternoon, or good morning to the folks on the West Coast. So yes, it came together pretty quickly, and we really did have a pretty unified front from the music community working on this. So I think the reason that we were able to get in some of these provisions about unemployment, and especially unemployment assistance for people who traditionally have not had access to that, freelancers, 1099ers, independent contractors, is because there was a real unified effort from unions to commercial enterprises to the nonprofit part of the sector. Everybody was pretty on the same page. The piece that I can't tell you a lot about is the government assistance that's built into the bill, because I haven't been tracking that as personally. But I can tell you that there is expanded unemployment that does apply to freelancers, gig workers. A lot of music industry folks fall into this category that traditionally have not been eligible. That will be calculated as 1/2 of the state's average weekly unemployment benefit plus an additional $600 a week. That is significant, and it's 39 weeks potentially, with the potential for a future bill to expand that. So beyond the usual 26 weeks of unemployment that's available. There are also going to be small business association administered loans available to for-profit or nonprofit organizations. These also may be available to self-employed people or independent contractors. So if you're a self-employed recording studio owner and you've been paying yourself a salary and want to be able to continue to pay yourself a salary, that's like an avenue that would be available to you. Some of those loans are actually going to be forgivable. So in sort of a sideways way, they'd become grants. That money will flow through local lenders, and demand is expected to be high. So folks that are interested in pursuing those opportunities on behalf of a nonprofit organization, on behalf of a local record store, on behalf of a bar or restaurant that has had to close, if they have a relationship with a local lender, now would be a good time to start those conversations, start reaching out. Otherwise, people should just start talking to their local banks and seeing what's available. Then, of course, I think we've seen in the news the recovery rebate, which is the one-time cash benefit, about $1,200 per adult. Some of the details on these provisions are not going to be available yet because the Treasury doesn't start drafting the guidelines until the bill is actually signed. So we're going to be continuing to track this, finding out more in the coming days and weeks about exactly how this is going to look. There is a little bit of arts funding that's built into it through the $75 million for the NEA, $75 million for the National Endowment for the Humanities, some public broadcasting funding that's in there. I think it's important when we're talking about this to be clear that this is not really a stimulus bill. This is primarily an employment preservation bill. It doesn't represent a big investment in preserving the economy. It's sort of keeping things at an employment level. So there are going to be additional future legislative efforts, probably a fourth and maybe a fifth bill down the road. For this group, I think that one thing that to put on your radar is just be clear about there's going to be some new technical assistance needs, and cities play an important role in that. There are going to be a lot of individual music workers that are going to be going through the process of applying for unemployment benefits for the first time, having never done that before, going through the process of applying for small business loans, whether it's for their band or for their local business or for themselves as an independent contractor for the first time. And at the same time, there are also going to be some potential, some states have already opened them up, but there's a potential for nationally for new healthcare special enrollment opportunities to open up. There are a lot of folks that are not necessarily used to interfacing with institutions. And so when help is made available, it can be difficult to get them looped in. And so there's an opportunity for collaboration, cooperative information sharing around that across nonprofit and for-profit divides and across disciplines. But the local level is where those relationships of trust are. And so, especially because I think that the federal government has not really designated clear avenues of funding for helping people navigate these things. And the philanthropic community has largely been focused on direct cash assistance through a range of really great organizations and programs, but they haven't been as invested in the resiliency piece of it, the infrastructure piece, the helping folks navigate these new systems and access these much larger pools of money.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be, like, be prepared at the local level to quickly invest some time and resources and help in helping people walk through that stuff. And we'll just continue to track it and look forward to sharing information as we have it.
So Kevin, thank you so much. That's so incredibly helpful. Just a couple of things to build off that. One, if anybody in this call does not follow Kevin's work at Future Music Coalition, he's a fantastic Twitter follow and does a good job of pushing out resources, information, and that is at the handle at Future Music. Is that underscore music? I forget.
Future _of _music.
Great. So, clearly, as you are tapped into a terrific network of service organizations and others here in DC, you're going to be pushing out information and resources through that platform. From the standpoint of today's call, again, we have a full agenda talking about other things, and we wanted to just, kind of tease this update with the understanding that next week's meeting is going to focus exclusively, we think, on implementation of this legislation, with the understanding, again, that these meetings recognize and honor the fact that things are moving very quickly, and there's a lot of things that we don't know yet. And there's some great questions we're seeing from Mira in Portland is asking clarifications that we're not going to get into now, but around whether small businesses are only forgiven if people are able to maintain their employment, things like that. So there's a lot of details coming, but we really wanted just to highlight a couple of the pieces that Kevin's been working on. Clearly, want to emphasize that a lot of this money is going to be going out as block grants or some of the money is going to be going out as block grants to state and local governments. And it's going to be very important for music communities to have very intentional strategies for how they are relating to their government to make the case for what type of investment or what type of recovery funds they're going to need. So we're going to talk about that later today. We have some updates around data collection and some tools that we're excited to offer next week. Don Pitts is going to lead that conversation. But for now, Kevin, thank you so much. Again, everybody follow him on Twitter. If there's something specific that you would like me to try to ask clarification from Kevin or others, go ahead and send me an email at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to traffic cop that. Again, with the caveat that we all know is that we are all under-resourced and don't have the staff capacity we'd like to be on top of every communication and every question. So anyway, huge thank you to Kevin and FMC and the team and the board there, and really appreciate your work, and thank you for joining us today.
No problem.
Awesome. So we're now going to switch to the three presenters that we had advertised. So the folks that are on the agenda. And what we wanted to do today is, and again, sort of as a template for these sessions, is to highlight people that are coming forward, organizations and individuals that have specific strategies and ideas and programs in place that we feel like are particularly interesting or useful, and maybe things that we can share, we can learn from or apply to our own circumstances. Again, nothing in the music community is completely cookie cutter. You can't just do, control, paste, and or copy paste into our cities. But what we do think very strongly, and part of the reason for our work, is that we can learn from each other in terms of the way different organizations or communities are approaching work. And so I'd like to turn the call over to Rick Thurman from the city of Charlotte. Rick and his community in Charlotte over the last couple of years have been doing really interesting ecosystem building work to kind of help strengthen and understand and strengthen the Charlotte music community. And he actually reached out last week with an email to the Music Policy Forum board with just kind of an overview of what they're doing proactively in the city to kind of have a coordinated response to the extent that that's possible, in anticipation of, really what has happened this week. I believe Charlotte this week, I think yesterday was, I believe the shelter in place was announced in the county, if I'm not mistaken. So I really appreciate Rick reaching out and his team reaching out, and I'm really excited to have him share a little bit about what they're doing before the crisis, but then how they've been able to kind of activate that into hopefully a little bit of a comprehensive strategy in the short and medium term. Rick, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and welcome. Hello, everyone. So quickly, sort of what we are, who we are. The name of our initiative is Music Everywhere CLT, and it's actually an initiative that's launched out of a nonprofit. I work for our downtown organization, and we incubated this initiative about 2 years ago. So it's not a standalone nonprofit. We're sort of heading that direction, but it's really sort of a program within a larger nonprofit, which is a long way of saying we have really no funding at all. Our main funder is one local corporate sponsor who just loved the idea and signed on to get us started. And so everything we do is community oriented. I like to say that our initiative is community-led, institution-supported, and everything we do starts with what the community wants and needs. We ask first, and then we work to deliver. The way we describe our initiative is a long-term civic and economic development initiative that will enhance Charlotte's music scene and industry so that it becomes a force for tourism, a means of building community, a differentiating talent attractor, a significant source of new jobs, and a cultural asset of which all of Charlotte is proud. And I've been leading that work for the last couple of years, sort of within my day job, which is community and economic development in our downtown and in an adjacent district. Our approach in general for everything we do is we serve first. So we don't start with the organization, we start with the community and what they need and want. Then we always ask. Anytime we have an idea, we go to the community first and say, hey, here's an idea, what do you think? In fact, that's how we started the initiative. We said, we have an idea for an initiative, what do you think? And as long as we get thumbs up, go-aheads from the music community, then we keep going, and then we keep testing the idea as we go, so that when the idea is out there, it's everybody's idea. It's not our idea. So we're not having to work to sell it to people. To do that, we convene. And I'll just kind of skip right to the sort of immediate. So I pretty quickly convened a Zoom call as soon as this started to really become apparent in Charlotte. And it was a Zoom call with what I call sort of my group of doers and leaders. And it's a cross section. It's not just sort of institutional leaders. It's people from all walks of life in the music community, but they tend to be doers and not complainers. And so we got them on a Zoom call, and sort of first it was just an outlet. How you doing? Laugh a little bit, play around with the Zoom backgrounds, and let's start assessing the impact right away on people. What are you feeling? How is it hurting your bottom line? And then we pretty quickly came up with an idea that, as various people mentioned they were going to start live streaming. So we saw an opportunity to help those efforts be successful. This is not a unique idea. I realize that there are other communities that are doing this as well. But we've learned pretty quickly to take what people are already doing here and then amplify and then fill gaps, and then connect other people that may be working on similar ideas. So right away, we launched, in about 3 days, we launched something we call Music Anywhere CLT, which is right now, it's essentially a Facebook calendar. We borrowed parts of the idea from Nashville and Wilmington. And if you go to our Facebook page, which is Music Everywhere CLT, you'll see our calendar. All we do is we ask local musicians and bands to add us as a co-host if they want. We're not trying to dictate. And then we will promote and amplify. And we've gotten a lot of good media coverage for this, which was one of our goals. So when we started right away, we came up with a quick plan. We had a media plan, a social media strategy. I had sort of a large email group that I connected with. Then we did a newsletter announcement to our newsletter audience, which is music community. And then we went live online and kept pushing it. And it's gotten really good traction, really good media attention. And our next step now, we're looking at the daytime audience. We see people responding really well to daytime streams. And we also know that we have parents like me and my wife who are trying to figure out how to homeschool. And our schools are closed till at least May 15th, and I'm guessing through the rest of the school year. And we have parents and kids looking for content during the day. We have musicians that are looking to additional ways to recoup lost income. And then we also have music teachers who are trying to find wider audiences. So we're going to start layering on scheduled live streams of educational components. We also think it's a great opportunity to allow people in the music community to say what they do. What does it mean to be a professional musician? What does it mean to own a venue? To help educate kids, but also adults, frankly, on what it's like to be a member of the music community and how they're being impacted by this current situation. We also, like a lot of people, we aggregated resources right away, sort of COVID-19 assistance resources. We're also now aggregating resources on ways to develop alternative revenue streams. A lot of it early in is around streaming, but now there are a lot of new ideas coming out as other ways that people can develop alternative revenue. And then now I'm starting to talk locally to companies to say, what can we do to create new revenue streams for artists while they're essentially sidelined over the next couple months, if not longer. The additional layers we have to get into next week is launching a micro grant program, really focused on resilience and allowing artists, bands, teachers, if there's something they need to help them generate income, that's what the micro grant program will be intended for. So for example, if you want to develop start streaming in your living room, but you need a mic or you need some piece of equipment that allow you to do that, that's what the grant program is for. It's not necessarily a sort of stopgap, pay the bills grant. That's not what this one's for. That's the next piece that we're working on now as a fund. I believe, and I really appreciate Kevin's sharing earlier, but I believe that independent artists are falling through the cracks right now, and a lot of the larger funds that I'm seeing developed. And I also firmly believe, especially in cities like Charlotte, if we don't step up right now and support our independent artists and creatives and musicians, they will leave. They will say, you know what, when I needed it most, you weren't there for me. I'm going to a place where the city was there for me. I think most musicians in Charlotte, at least, operate with this sort of nagging sense of the city doesn't support what I do. I suspect that that's true in just about every city, frankly. If we don't find a way to step up and support them now, they'll be out the door as soon as they can to a place that did support their artists during this time. And continuing to host the Zoom calls for whoever wants to participate. It just gives people a chance to share, laugh, and an outlet. And the last piece I'll add too is that the other layer of this beyond just income that we found helpful is a creative outlet. Several people right away in our Zoom calls were really concerned over mental health and in our case, the music community. It's not a good recipe when you have independent musicians trapped at home with lost income, canceled gigs, no way to connect with an audience. That's not a good combination. So just the chance to show that, hey, somebody's got your back, and then also to put a stream out there, even those little hearts floating up the screen, that alone is enough to get people through the day. And if that's all we can offer, to me, that's enough. But the income, recouping lost income, I think is a bigger piece of what we're getting into next.
Rick, that's awesome. I really, I appreciate all that. And I love the way that I think you're hitting, so many different bases simultaneously and trying to kind of innovate on the fly. And I love the sort of continuity between, the groundwork that you laid for a number of years in terms of like, how do you even make the case or how do you even think about Charlotte? We talk a lot about every city is a music city and they have their own definition of what does that mean. and then be able to translate that in this time of need. And I think, you know, the way you're thinking about this from an advocacy framework in terms of really trying to identify and resource, you know, what musicians and the music, you know, world is going to need locally and how to kind of bridge that. Is there a place that you could point people to? I know that Gigi put the Music Everywhere CLT website into the chat. Is there anything else that you would ask people to go to or suggest they want to track what you're doing in Charlotte?
Yeah, I think so our website, I think situations like this also expose weaknesses and deficiencies. And I would say for us, it's the fact that we're working with a website vendor that doesn't have the fastest of turnaround time. So you won't see a lot of what I've just talked about reflected on the site until next week. So we turn to social media to really push those efforts out. So our Facebook page at the moment is the best place, and that's the Music Everywhere CLT. That's where you'll find the Music Anywhere CLT series hosted. We're also Instagram, which is Music Everywhere CLT, and then Twitter, which is Music CLT. So the social channels right now are the best spots to learn more. You could also, folks could just email me directly if they want, or they can just message through those social platforms and I'll get it. That's probably the best way. Message me through the social platforms and I'll get it. Then our website should reflect all of this work next week.
That's fantastic. And I want to also flag that as we're sort of mapping out these sessions over the next couple of weeks, we absolutely are going to be highlighting or attempting to highlight the whole question around mental health services, you know, for music workers. And I really, really want to hold up the point about the isolation and the fear and anxiety, and the fact that so many of the amazing people we work with in creative community already have that baked into their DNA because of the fragility of our systems. And so that's a topic that we, you know, obviously there's no easy answers on any of this stuff, but something that we aim to turn to in the next couple of weeks to showcase some models that might have some promise. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. And now we're going to pivot to Denver, Colorado, Mile High City. Lisa Gadegas with Denver Arts and Venues. Again, most of you in this meeting know Lisa well, certainly know of her work. They've been at the vanguard of this Music Cities conversation in the States for many, many years. And Lisa, as a city employee and as an arts activist and an artist herself and connector and strategist, has been someone that we all look up to and enjoy. And I asked her to join us today because a lot of us in communities across the country, you know, look at what at the resources and sort of the approach that they take in Denver, particularly around some direct arts funding strategies. You know, we really hold those up as aspirational for a lot of cities. And of course, Denver, you know, unique because they have Red Rocks, they have revenue streams that a lot of communities don't have. But certainly there's some thinking and some intention behind what they do. So I asked Lisa to join, both because of the ongoing work with the grant programs, but also just to get a sense at this early stage. I know things are very fluid and changing, and you're like everybody else trying to sort a bunch of stuff out. But anything that you could share in terms of what are the next steps that you guys are taking in the city, what decisions have you made, and kind of what does this look like, you know, kind of moving forward from your standpoint?
Yeah, then can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for putting this together for us. I am gonna kind of ramble through a lot. As you can imagine, we're working fast like everybody else right now to kind of make things make sense, and to get money out the door where and when we can, while also listening to our communities about what they need right now. It was good to listen to Kate Becker from King County the other day to kind of encourage us all to keep asking our community to track themselves and to track their losses and challenges and anything else they can. They're probably not used to doing that right now, but that helps later to advocate for more funding or any funding that might come in. Denver has a population of about 700,000 people. Colorado, we're at 6 million. The virus right now has reached about 1,400 positive cases around Colorado. And I think 24 deaths in Colorado and 3 in Denver as of last night, and everything keeps changing. So we're tracking, the mayor has put us on a stay at home. So that goes through April 11th right now. Denver Arts and Venues, as Michael mentioned, we run Red Rocks and our Performing Arts Complex, Convention Center, and a few other venues. Those have all been closed to all events through April 12th right now. And we're just tracking, you know, so then we say that, and then we have to reassess what's going to happen. So in the meantime, I do run an initiative called Create Denver. I really focus on the creative economy as a whole, and supporting them. We did put out a music strategy 2 years ago now, and including a music fund. So I'll tap into that as well. Sorry, I'm getting weird prompts. So as of last week, one of the things that we did, we've been working with a local organization called Redline, and they put up a artist survey, and we looked at other artist surveys that have been put up by Americans for the Arts, or in other cities like Boston and that kind of thing. So they launched a survey. I think that's another good tool for us, and we recommend it for other cities. We're happy to share any data that we're collecting or the questions that we're asking. But again, to advocate later and to get our artists to be responding to these. Majority of them are visual artists and musicians. So that intel on that music strategy side is just as important to us, as well as everybody. I think at this point, I can't remember how many respondents they've had, but during that time, we launched what we call the Artist Relief Fund through Arts and Venues. And we've never really had a fund that went directly to artists. So this is a learning curve, but we do a lot of grant giving, and built a rubric and some guidelines immediately that would be up to $1,000 for any artist that is having immediate issues in the next 30 to 60 days regarding rent, other bills, food, healthcare, student loans, anything else like that. That got launched last Thursday. We had $130,000, and it was up for 12 hours. We had 300 respondents in 12 hours, so we had to close it, which is not easy. And we are now vetting all those applications. It's a first come, first serve, so it depends on number 1 through number 300 in order. And we have a panel of our Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs helping us review these and trying to get these out the door as soon as possible. So within a week, we have already put out, I want to say 75 grants and about 57,000 of those monies. We're doing payment immediately, so there's no 30-day waiting period. We're trying to get out of the typical bureaucracy timeline as much as we can. And we hope to fund the rest of that 130, hopefully by the end of next week or the week after. While we're doing that, we had to adjust some of that funding from another grant we had this year. So we're thinking about how to translate the money that we have this year for other programs or projects into relief funding right now. It's easier than getting your budget reapproved or asking for new money. So any way you can think about that creatively is super helpful. And you know, we're looking at other programming we can add to that pot, as well as working with the state of Colorado. Colorado Creative Industries, I know, is looking at doing more statewide funding focused on rural areas. And we've had donors and other partners come to the table and say they're interested in also donating to the cause, which has been great. There's been great grassroots efforts of, you know, COVID artist funds that people are raising themselves on GoFundMe. And in the meantime, we're seeing a lot of, we're taking note of a lot of other initiatives that are going on around the globe and nationally, which has been great. I mean, we've seen people do virtual fundraisers with music. Music Cares has put out more COVID funding for healthcare. Bandcamp is stopping to charge fees There's a virtual music event guide now that's out as well. So anytime we can be sharing this with each other, I think is great. Again, if anyone's interested in doing some kind of grant building, we're happy to share the data we found and the questions we're asking. And I think it's been pretty key. And I'm just going to share out a little bit of information on those 300 that applied. And again, we asked what their needs were for the next 30 to 60 days. The total ask with these 300 people was about $534,000. The average range of need was between $400 and $6,000. So, or the ask, and the average was about $1,800. And again, the most we gave out was $1,000. 27 of those people were under financial strain. To us, that's loss of income impacts their ability to continue their current lifestyle. 120 answered that this was financial distress with limited savings and unable to pay bills, and 148 had said it was severe financial distress, no savings, and no way to cover the basics like food and rent. 95 of our respondents had no additional income resources. I'm sorry, 200 respondents had no additional sources of income, and 113 respondents had financially had been responsible for other people in their household, whether that's children or parents or grandparents. So again, we're trying to look at that data while we're building the ship at the same time. We're looking at more partnerships, more resources, and we'd like to get this open up again while I'm fielding a lot of emails that are saying, what happened to the fund? When are you going to open it again? Where else can we go? We've developed resource pages on the Arts and Venues website. Redline has also done the same, that organization we're working with. And we update those every day. We're getting more knowledge around the country of more places people can apply for funding. And I have been tracking those emails so that when and if we do open up more funding, we send them out information right away. So it's a lot of data gathering right now, but we're really glad to be seeing money go out the door. As for other grants that we're looking at, we do run a Denver Music Advancement Fund. That is part of our music strategy with Denver. That's been going out 2 years in a row now. This is year 3. We usually have about $100,000 to $115,000. We have partners on that, Illegal Pete's Burrito Company, and now Take Note Colorado. So we're trying to field how to reposition that grant, because we absolutely want to keep it for music, and kind of adapt it to what's going on right now. That grant really acts as a model to support music programming and projects already that prove that music's a vital role in economic development and education and so on. So we've given out about 60 grants since it opened 2 years ago. So we know people are tracking on arts education opportunities. We're getting calls and emails about virtual classes online for music, for students, for after school programs. Now there's no school, so how do they do it with parents during the day? So I think we're going to be looking at how to kind of tweak this, but still let the community tell us what their ideas are and help fund those additional projects. I wrote down so many other notes. We are still working and have been on emergency preparedness planning, and we have a network with festival producers and event people and people in performing arts. So any way you can kind of build your own emergency spaces with your people and venues, feel free to contact us and other people to learn more about that too. But I hope that kind of covers a few things that we're in the midst of.
Yeah, Lisa, that's awesome. I want to amplify a couple of things that you said and kind of pull forward on a couple of ideas. I think one, question we're getting in the chat room. A couple questions. One, just around if the application language is available. Is that available online that people can just see? Is it that's on the Arts and Venues website?
Because the application closed, it's not available, but I'm absolutely happy to send it to you to send out to anyone. That is no problem at all. We can do that today.
Great. So if you want a copy of that, email me at musicpolicyforum@gmail, and we'll try to forward that over to y'all. A really good question, and one of the reasons, Lisa, I wanted you to be on this call is the whole notion of local music organization funding and moving into direct artist support is something that's not something we do in this country particularly well. It's something I think we've had, collective conversations for years about looking at other international models and thinking about how to bring them into an American context. And we've had a lot of conversations about that. Could you share, anything that are there concerns locally about like the transparency of the panels, who gets to make those decisions? Are they, what becomes that accountability in communities that are part of why the Denver scene is so great is that it's so tight knit and everybody is so deeply connected. Is that something that you have any wisdom to share, or just something you just, you have to do and you guys are just going to do it and just deal with the consequences?
Well, I mean, I'll try to answer that in a couple ways quickly, but Create Denver has always been dedicated to individual artists, businesses, and organizations. So the whole ecosystem, because that's not a creative economy without everybody. And that's always been our value system and our goal. So while we are giving grants to these artists, it's not unusual for us to do that. We do that with mural programs and things like that, but we've never had even a grant that's been for artists to do their artwork. So now we're giving a grant that is directly for individuals to kind of help them out. Mm-hmm. We know there's a need there. And if we are able to do that kind of thing right now, that is the most critical thing we could be doing. And I think it's okay, and everyone understands that programmatic granting, whether it is to an individual or other people, this is where the need is the most. So to find them where they're at, how do we make that as equitable as possible is really challenging. As any grant giving or any money giving is. So we have always been very careful about our platform around diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. We have one, we've built it over the past few years. We've done a lot of that work and training in our own organization and with our own leadership, and then with our own commissions. And now it's throughout the city. We work with commissions of all types through the city to do that kind of training and value system. So we're always coming into that with that lens, including our panelists or any committees we have or reviewers. We have training tools for people scoring things like this that's around bias alone. So we can always share any of our knowledge that we have written down in our policies, but we're coming at this quickly. So it's the hardest thing about this, I think, is the reach and making sure that people are being reached that need it the most. And you can write a lot of that into your guidelines and kind of help people realize, like, well, maybe there is somebody else that needs it more than me. I'll be really considerate about my ask. We ask them what is the minimum amount you need, knowing that they can only get up to 1,000. Some people have asked for just small increments of funding, but ultimately we don't know where this goes, or how far the need is going to go. So, one thing at a time, get out a chunk of money when you can, do it in spurts, and then just reassess. I hope that kind of helps answer that question.
Yeah, totally. It totally does. And I have, for those of you who know me, if it's not fun, if you can't make it, the maximum, level of complication. So this is probably a terrible idea. But one of the things that strikes me is, a lot of our community are asked to be panelists at the NEA or panelists or reviewers of grants. And I wonder if there would be any logic in thinking about some sort of network of panelists where we could do almost a panel share. So you don't have to be like the local DC people don't have to be reading the DC grants and then have to deal with the incoming. So if you don't get the, if the organization or individual doesn't get funded, at least you can say, well, it wasn't, it was done by a national panel. It wasn't done locally because somebody hates you, or something like that. But anyway, that's probably way too complicated. But
I mean, sign me up for anything like that. We're
well,
already working. We're already
No,
working an enormous number of hours a day. I'm happy to help with that kind of thing if other cities need more of a push and need any more advocacy to say, hey, there's other people doing this. They're willing to partner with us, at least on that end.
Awesome.
We certainly would.
And we're already getting feedback in the chat about the bias training tools language. People are excited about that. And so we'll more to come, again, understanding, Lisa, that you've got a lot on your plate. So thank you for sharing today. I want to call out one thing that I think is really important from what you said, and then we're going to pivot and build off of another really important thing you said. This is a call to our community that I think the one biggest missing piece that we need to solve in the next 72 hours, if possible, are identifying and promoting training tools to help our creative workers understand how to track those losses, particularly projected losses, and try to bring some continuity to that, because I'm worried, A, that that's something that doesn't come natural to most people. B, if everybody does it their own, that's going to create a bureaucratic barrier or nightmare when we're trying to administer funds. And that just seems like a no-brainer that somebody either has developed those tools or is working on them or has done that. So again, if anybody out there either wants to take that on or knows of somebody who's already figured that out, please let me know at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. And we'll try to circle back. And that's something we definitely want to highlight on these calls, just to help train our creatives in terms of how to do that particular niche.
And I would just mention that in our application, and again, we can share all the questions and the questions from our surveys, we definitely have allowed for 3 areas for uploading documents. And people have been doing anything from screen grabs of their phone texts from clients that are like, sorry, your gig has been canceled, or this tour has been canceled. Anything that they can supply, they should be holding on to those things too. It's not just an Excel doc that they have to like type a bunch of stuff into, but that and true examples are really useful.
Yep. So, and people ping me, please, if you have either want to take that on or have an enterprising grad student who would know how to do that very well, or we could put together a de facto working group to just kind of try to help with that information. So the pivot here, so Lisa, that was awesome. And thank you so much for taking time with us. And now we're going to bring Don Pitts into the conversation, because we want to focus the last 10 minutes of today's conversation around the question of data tools and metrics and basically how do you not only sort of document, what's happening in your local music scene, but then how do you, think about that as a tool and a resource that you can then hand to, whether it's commissioned by your public employees, or if you're working outside city or regional government, that's something you can work with them on and hand to them, because everybody, every sector, of course, is impacted by the shutdown, and every sector, most sectors are going to have, some sort of, everybody's gonna be telling their story. And a lot of that's going to be done with data. So Don, I think you don't have a camera today. Is that right? We don't get to see your beautiful face?
I don't. I switched computers with my 10-year-old.
That's nice. But you've got that's a handsome shirt you got in that headshot. So that's good. Yeah. So thank you for hitting cleanup here, or whatever the baseball analogy is on what should be opening day. Again, we've talked about, I think everybody, again, in this meeting knows the importance of data collection and creating context around data, and trying to, again, the whole notion of democratizing access to research tools is really one of the founding principles of the Music Cities Together partnership that Music Policy Forum has launched this year in partnership with Don and his team. And we have some updates that we want to share, because we understand, obviously, Music Policy Forum, that we are collectively awash in surveys. And this has been, for a lot of reasons, one of the most immediate responses to the crisis has been, it feels like every sector and every community and every network is out putting surveys into the field. And I don't think that's a good thing or a bad thing or neither thing. I think it's probably a good thing that people are trying to, build data, and it's, and it's good to be early on this. We also recognize that there's some potential here to create and to share some tools and put them out into the field that could be leveraged or used by community organizations or cities or others that are trying to think about some best practices in documenting what's happening here, and potentially create some benchmarking, contiguous benchmarking opportunities to have some shared data now in terms of data collection at this moment that then potentially could be built on, 9 months down the road, a year down the road, et cetera. So we've been in the laboratory. Don has been talking to a lot of people over the last couple of weeks, and I think we're excited about some of the things that, Don, you're about to share with everybody. So take it away. What should we be looking for next week coming out of our laboratory?
Well, thank you. I guess the first part is I agree with all the surveys that are out there. We've been looking at a lot of them the last week. There's a lot of possibility for data contamination between how they're separated. So we've been really working how to get the most comprehensive data set without, we know the survey fatigue and so forth. With this, because you were twisting my arm, but I surveyed about 15 cities last week, and it was kind of a mixed signal of, we don't need a survey. Survey's the last thing we need. Some of them said, yes, we need the data. So a couple of them called back and said, oh my God, we actually need the data. So with the stimulus package that was being approved today, there's a lot of sectors in the ecosystem, and we've been designing the survey to kind of capture that information on how it's impacting business owners, employees of entertainment businesses and music businesses, as well as the contractor and the gig economy folks. I was talking to Bruce in Columbus yesterday, and I think he shares the same concern that we do, is that the stimulus package that Congress passed, if you look at the cities like New York, Nashville, and LA, that was really advocating, that had the organized advocacy groups, those were the ones that were at the table. And I think our concern is, from the data that we have over the last 2 years, over 14,000 independent music professionals, 50% of the folks aren't part of that industry infrastructure. So I think it's important, when you called last week pushing us to kind of help with a national survey. So we're ready. It'll be available, I would say, Monday afternoon. I think if our goal is that we can send you a link. We would love to actually be more strategically, instead of a shotgun approach rolling it out, work with you specifically in a city, get more strategic as we launch it, and then as it takes off, people can do it nationally. But it'll be absolutely free. We'll share the data with you in your city, and so that's. I don't know if anyone you want to add. So.
No, that's definitely the head, kind of the headlines, and so you're anticipating that is going to live. Where will people be able to find that? And you're still thinking Monday-ish?
Yeah, I think in Monday. I think the best advice right now, if they want to help spread the news in their city and in their region, and if they can help, if they want to either, we can, however you want to split it up, we can either do info@soundmusiccities, or send everything to your Gmail, or we can send them to the Music Cities Together Gmail address. So that's your call live on Zoom.
Well, so, I mean, let's be clear what we're suggesting to people. So if you are interested, so the survey tools are out there and people don't need to ask permission to take the tools and send them to their community, right? I mean, so that's, that's there, and people
Yeah.
have the right, to take them and just to localize it for their region, if they want to. So if a community activist on this call wants to take those, 18 questions and localize it for Birmingham, Alabama, that's totally fine. Is
That's
that correct?
right. Yeah, and this kind of goes in line with what you and I have been working on for the last several months, is how do we democratize kind of this
Right.
research work anyway. So we've just kind of been thrust into this situation.
Yep. So one level is that they're kind of open source tools that will be published on Monday. They're not available now, but they'll be published on Monday on the Sound Music Cities. There'll be a link there. There'll be a link off the musicpolicyforum.org website. A second would be if people are looking for advice, resources, brainstorming, collaboration, then again, email us either at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com or at musiccitiestogether@gmail.com. I guess would be the other place to go. I guess, is that right, Don? Or is that,
Yes.
or am I?
No, that's great. Yeah, musiccitiestogether.org.
That's right.
Yeah, they could just go there. I think actually that would probably be the best centralized location.
Yep. And Gigi's put that into the chat so people can find that link. So, and I want to be clear. I think that again, the point of this exercise is really two or threefold. I think, one is, again, the most important one is that we know that people are engaging in data collection. They need to be engaged in data collection, and if they have not done that before, or if they don't know where to turn, or if they feel like they need, advice or resources, we want to make these available, because these are tools that, one of the reasons that Music Policy Forum wanted to work with Don to make these available is that two of our board members have commissioned, music censuses in the last couple of years in DC and in Seattle. So we know that, Don and his team have been working to kind of advance the field. And I think we all approach this with a great deal of humility. I know, Don, you approach with a great deal of humility, that this is really a moving target in terms of how these surveys work. But we wanted to share, again, kind of the best ideas that we have at this moment about what these tools could look like. The second piece, again, being we want there to be accessibility in terms of conversations around how people are using these tools and what that should look like. We clearly want to be informed by your perspectives in the community about what you think we should be doing with these tools, or others should be doing with these tools. I don't think anybody would claim to, sort of be the experts in terms of what we're looking for in research right now. And then the third, as I said before, is it feels very likely that there's going to be more of a strategic macro conversation about what data was gathered during this moment that's going to be informing future policy conversations and future conversations around the structures of the industry. So to the extent to which there's some commonality there, that would be super helpful.
No, I agree. And I think that's the goal of sharing this, far and wide and for free. What you have been talking about is the need for it to be consistent as well across the board. And I think so, because I think the conversation is already starting to heat up online as far as who is first in line for some of that stimulus package, and the ink's probably still wet on the signature right now.
Exactly. So we are at time. And
I was going to say we have a couple kind of stray questions. I think we're addressed them, so I was going to suggest for some of them. So one was asking about the template to send to musicians. I think that's a follow-up item to send to musicpolicyforum@gmail.com to get a copy of that, or how would you like to be sharing that? And then there are some questions, and again, the ink is not dry, but there's some great questions that were still in the question box as to the interrelationship between small business loans and continuation of business. And I might suggest that we're possibly a little early to the dance of that, but that also might be a great follow-up with musicpolicyforum@gmail.com with people who would like to maybe have a second conversation or a follow-up when we know a little deeper and broader what the impact's going to be.
And I think the point to stress on that is, I, for better or for worse, like many of us in this meeting, lived through the Recovery Act in 2009. which was a $700 billion piece of legislation, and was really written in a sort of political moment where all bets were off and people were just innovating and making up ideas and throwing money into places never been thrown before. And it's just like Katie barred the door. And this legislation is 3 times that in terms of overall scale of investment and sort of innovating on the fly in terms of how the money is going to be used. So it's going to be fascinating, obviously, to see, just the information sharing is going to be critical. And again, we're an under-resourced community in terms of infrastructure. So, we don't have legal aids running down to like run through the bill and all the rest of that stuff. So we're going to have to definitely be doing the best we can do as a community to be distilling information about how this is going to work in practicality. The one thing that I can't reiterate enough is the importance of strengthening, to the extent, again, if you work for government, thank you for being part of this community and you're already engaged in terms of how do you have those bridges to your local music community because you understand the value of that and the importance of that. If you are in this conversation and you don't work for government, if you haven't, I think most people here already have, but this is the time to really make sure you're holding your public officials close, not necessarily from a standpoint of like, I want that money, but from a standpoint of like, we need to stay in dialogue so you can help us. So what are you going to need for information? How do we share that with the community? How do we kind of work through the process here? Because it's going to be, again, something we've never been through on an economic level, and certainly in our history economically. And then again, I think even saying that makes me kind of sick to my stomach because we also need to hold up the much more important piece of this, which is, again, we are still in the early stages of a public health calamity, a mental health calamity. Our people are really hurting. They're extraordinarily vulnerable. And so, again, it's important to be able to do what we've talked about at Music Policy Forum about how you segment this. And there's a public health crisis, there's a recovery crisis, and there's a long-term implementation conversation about what do we take away from everything, from the economic and the public health piece of this long-term. But it is going to be, again, important, for people like Mira in Portland and others to make sure that you're just having those relationships in place. I know a lot of the folks, again, in this call do that work really well already.
And I'd like to then do a transition to our close. That these will be weekly. Please stay tuned for that. Please put a pin in your ever-moving, quite chaotic calendars of April 17th. You can go to amplifymusic.org. A group of, I think we're now up to 30 or 40 organizations are co-hosting what now might be more than 1 day long virtual conference, bringing ideas from a wide variety of communities globally together across many organizations. So many thanks to Music Policy Forum and Sound Music Cities for being part of that adventure. You can grab a call for speakers, call for organizations. Please join in that. There's a lot of amazing things happening of people who either have really unique solutions for their cities that you might take home, or other cities that you might want to get inspired by to do things that could be longer term recovery connections. So please thank virtually, however you thank at your home. We do a lot of jazz hands in my community now. Michael Bracey, Rick Thurman, Don Pitts, and Lisa for joining us today. And this will be living on YouTube. This will be on video on Music Policy Forum. And this will also be on the Innovating Music podcast next time we have an episode come out. So thank you all very much. And again, if you're looking for templates and other adventures, it's musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. Thank you all and have a safe and happy weekend. What is a weekend? A weekend. Thank you all.